was close. I was about a minute away from still changing. So, hey, great to have everybody here today, and thank you for those of you who participated in graduations and parties and everything else. It's a good time of celebration. We are in that essence really a ascending church, a missional church, and that a lot of the people that come in, probably about a third of our congregation is made up of college students, and so you know that every year you're going to have individuals who graduate, they go from here to somewhere else. They take what they've learned in discipleship and love and fellowship, the DNA that is right here at UHBC, and they take that to places like California, which probably needs it, and St. Louis and Dallas and other places around the world. And so that's really an exciting thing. This church is involved in a number of areas of missions, but let's not forget, one of our greatest ones is missional to college students, and I think that's a very unique thing and special thing here at UHBC. Look, if you're a guest and you want to let us know that, inside the bulletin there's a little QR code that you can scan. It'll let you in and you can let us know that you're here. Happy Mother's Day, or Day of the Mother, right? It's a good thing. I had a chance to spend some time with my mother yesterday and had lunch with her in Ponca City, Oklahoma yesterday with my father, and had a good time there, and we worked on some chicken stuff and went out to the back 40 or 80 or whatever it is and wandered around a bit. So it was good to be with my mom. And look, if your mother is still living, certainly you need to reach out to her. If not, I would suggest taking a moment and reflect on some special times that maybe you had with her. When you leave, if you haven't gotten a carnation already, ladies, get one. And then there's a little area right outside the foyer that we've set up where if you want to take a picture for Mother's Day, you can get everybody around, get yourself a picture, post that. Just have fun, because we think it's important to celebrate the Day of the Mother, which is really good. If you have your Bibles, get them out. We're still going to be in 1 Timothy. We're in 1 Timothy chapter 5. We'll be looking at verses 11 through 16. We'll complete this journey of 1 Timothy in July. And then in July, we're going to spend 5 weeks and study, are you ready? The book of Haggai. When's the last time Haggai was taught on a Sunday morning? Probably never, right? So we're going to do it right here. And then later on, when the fall kicks off, we're going to do a series on stories you learned as a kid in Sunday school applied to today. So that'll be kind of a fun little thing we'll do. And then we'll get back into a book again. So just so you know where we're going. What Paul is doing so far here in chapter 5, he's addressing something that's very important to the church. It's the importance that we look out for each other, that we treat each other as family, as a community. That's why I love what we're doing here today. I mean, you got a group of guys who are knit together, probably closer than brothers. Their families actually all come together in this type of celebration, and that's what the church is supposed to be. One group that was often left behind in Paul's day was widows, be those who lost a husband. So Paul has given some rules on about widows for the church to follow, because again, that's really the theme of 1 Timothy. The theme of 1 Timothy is the life and leadership of the local church. And what Paul is saying is that helping each other out is a responsibility, and caring after widows is part of the life of the local church. And we had 2 rules that we talked about last week. We had a general rule for widows. We said believers are to look after widows. That's something we should be doing no matter what. Scripture overflows with this general rule that we're supposed to make sure that widows, whether it's a neighbor, a friend, whatever, part of your church, that we're looking after them. And in a general way, we can help any widow that we want to individually or desire to as a church. There's no prohibition. There's no guidelines to follow if you want to. But what Paul is addressing here is a specific group that the church has to take care of. And that's the specific rule for widows, is the church should support widows who are true widows. We saw that in verses 3 through 10 last week. There's a general rule. You can help anybody out. You can show them love. You can show them grace. But there's a responsibility for the church mandated to help true widows. And that word honor in verse 3 meant to support. And the way it's used, it means really financially and materially. That there's a greater weight than just providing some food or maybe providing something small. This is getting in and getting our hands dirty, stepping in. And basically the church is becoming a husbandry figure over that widow to take care of them until death if they're a true widow. Now, Paul's not talking about all widows. We saw 10 aspects last week if a widow qualifies for this extra help. He said, first of all, check with the family. because the family has the first responsibility. We had that application. You better get together your siblings, your family, and have a plan to make sure that you take care of your mama. If you haven't done that yet, I suggest you do that. I've been in situations where the family had the first responsibility. I knew of family members that were there, and they were not taking care of their mother. And so, as a representative of the church, I got to call a child, and I tried to express to them the need that their mama had and gave them that opportunity to meet the true need. But if there is no family, or maybe a family is unwilling to help, that's when the church steps in, and that's the type of help that this widow has to be a faithful believer, we saw last week, focused on Christ, above reproach, at least 60 years of age, and a godly woman. This isn't just someone you know. It's not just a neighbor. It's not just someone that we have freedom to help. This is the obligation of the church for a specific type of widow. Now, I've been a member or a pastor of, I think, at least 10 different churches in my life, and some of them have tried to help in this area, but let's just be honest. Most of them have fallen drastically short because it's a challenging one. I mean, how is the church supposed to step in? I've known churches that have stepped in to provide housing for widows and then sold the houses later on without providing an alternative for widows. And let me just suggest the reputation in the community was worse off afterwards than it was beforehand. And most of what I've seen done is what I would call a small token. And probably not at all like what Paul's talking about here. And truthfully, in any church, there may only be one or two, a small handful of true biblical widows that need this type of help. But it's our role to be looking out for that this morning. Today, we're going to look at younger widows. We're going to see a challenge issued for women and then reemphasize the role for the church for widows. Now, in this wonderful passage where Paul says, take charge or take care of widows, in verse 11, he says, but. And now we have a contrast. So there's an obligation to make sure that we take care of true widows who fit in that list. But there's a contrast. The contrast is, don't put younger widows on the list for required help from the church. Now, a couple things about that statement that's really interesting there in verse 11 is that keeping track of widows is actually important. A list that you have in context, that's actually a positive thing. We have a list of some of those that we believe are widows. We have deacons assigned to them to reach out to them on a regular basis. But guess what? We may not know who every widow is in our congregation. Therefore, you have the responsibility to let us know in the church, hey, you may not know this or not, but did you know this person's a widow? Believe it or not, I don't know every person in the church who's a widow. I haven't had that conversation. So if you know of someone and you go, obviously, Rodney knows they are, chances are we don't. And even if we do, we'd love to talk to you. So send us an email, give us a call. Let us know individuals who go, hey, this person's just a widow, and we want to make sure that in general we're helping them out. Because from time to time, individuals may slip through, and we don't want that to happen. It also means that those who are on the list, that he's talking specifically, have been identified as true biblical widows, the ones that the church is obligated to help. Now, that's important for a couple of reasons, because if the church has stepped in to help them out and support them, they believe that they meet the biblical qualifications. That probably means that in that widow, the church knows them in a general way. They've probably been there for a while. They're encouraging, and hopefully the church helping them is encouraging to that widow. And it sets a standard for whom the church is to help out in this context, and it provides accountability. Now, when Paul says don't put younger widows on the list, he's not prohibiting us from helping anyone out in general or family. Anyone that the church desires to help, they can. But this list Paul's talking about is the required help from the church to help widows. And Paul goes, don't put younger widows on there, assuming those who are under the age of 60. So our guidelines are help can be offered, but it's not required. We probably all know someone, a lady, who lost their husband. And they were left picking up the pieces. Maybe they had children. They didn't know what they're going to do next, and it's overwhelming. So absolutely, should we as believers, should we as a church help them? The answer is yes. Step in, provide help, provide guidance where we can, provide encouragement. And that encouragement might last even a few years until the family is settled, maybe they're refocused, maybe they can move on their own. And Paul's addressing, though, this required help. And this verse that he has in verse 11 is those that were not required to help. And Paul's going to go into detail on why that's important. And then I believe in verse 11 and 12, he's contrasting the benefit of an older widow with the challenge of a younger widow. So number 2, he says, allow younger widows to get married again without making a pledge to God. That looks kind of weird when you see it. When you glance back up to verses 3 through 10, an older widow was married to one man and was faithful. And the implication is she's probably not getting married again. Further, that older widow has committed herself to serve God and allow God to take care of her. So in a sense, she's saying, I'm going to follow God. This is my mission. This is what I'm going to do, basically allowing God to take care of her. These are the type of widows that the church is supposed to come alongside and help, to come alongside her as she serves God and enable her to do so. But there's a method in Paul's madness to say, don't put younger widows on the obligated list, because the church needs to help protect their reputation. Paul's giving a contrast of what to do with what not to do, or what's done in the best interest of the younger widow. So in context, Paul is saying these older widows, which are beyond reproach, they're godly, they're already helping the church, they're prayer warriors, they're above the age of 60. If the church is helping them, they've made a commitment to God and really to the church. And they're not planning on getting married again. But he says, let's say a younger widow tries to make that same commitment. Maybe in a day of emotion, in a period of time, she makes a vow, a pledge to God. I'm going to live the rest of my life at age 25, never marrying again, and I'm going to let God take care of me. And then the church looks and goes, well, I guess we have to help her out. And so they put her on the list, right? Well, there's a charge that's here against that, because what happens if later on she decides to get a little older, maybe she has kids, she wants to marry again. And then the younger widow, what would be causing her to do would be to forsake her pledge to not get married, to get married. And the church will have partnered with her in that process because we would have encouraged her in that issue. So he goes, look, don't put younger widows on the list. Let them have a chance to get married. You don't want her to look back. And it says something about condemnation. That condemnation is not eternal. But if she has taken funds from the church because she's on the list, then he says, well, that has a stricter judgment. There's an accountability that's there. Now, some have tried to look at these two verses and suggest by the phrase sensual desires that there's something kind of weird going on here, like the widow is burning with some sort of desire, craves the physical, or because she just wants to get married, she's going to marry the first person that comes along, whether it's a believer or not, because being a widow in the ancient world will be challenging. But that's not what Paul's saying. The phrase sensual desire means to give free rein to. And it's specific in context, free rein in disregard to Christ. Again, that's a widow who's now made a commitment to serve God, and instead of keeping her pledge intact, is making a decision that goes directly against her pledge to serve Christ. So there's two aspects. Don't let her make a pledge, and don't put a younger widow on that list because you potentially put her in a challenging situation. So what Paul is saying here is not a slam against younger widows. He's actually protecting them. Paul also doesn't condemn them getting remarried again. He almost encourages it to them, like it would be a good thing. So not only does it protect their reputation, it also eliminates them from challenging situations. We saw in chapter 4, Paul says that you have to deal with challenges, that we're family. He talked about how to address older men, older women, younger men, younger women. And now he has a practical application. There could be a temptation for someone that's younger. And in the context of 1 Timothy, Paul's already dealt with leadership, and he addressed both elders and deacons. And under deacons, he talked about women deacons and had some specific things to say about them to make sure that deacons were not gossips. In other words, they would have information and then they shared it with others. You see, when we serve one another, sometimes we get in some awkward situations where you know some things. People share some things. And you have to have a certain spiritual maturity so that you don't sin and take someone's challenges of life and then you begin to pass it on and you gossip. And it would be an unnecessary temptation, Paul says, to put a younger widow in some sort of pledge to serve God and then put them in situations where they may not have the age or the spiritual maturity to handle them. They might see and hear some things that they can't keep in confidence. And look, I've seen this at times with parents, and even though I don't have any children, I've seen parents who their parenting style is this. They say something like, we are open with our kids about anything and everything. Now, again, I'm not a parent, but as a general rule, let me suggest that's unwise. You're asking your child to keep certain confidences of knowing things that they may not even comprehend, and then we're placing that on a child not to be able to share those things. I would suggest that's probably not fair to the child. In the same way, I think Paul is saying that's not fair to a younger widow. The church needs to help protect those younger widows from those challenging situations and temptations where they may know some information and have maybe a little bit extra time to share it. Paul continues his guidelines in verse 14 with a therefore. Okay, because what he just said, he has another solution. And again, Paul's actually empowering younger widows. He's taking off the restrictions that he might have for an older widow. Our next guideline is encourage them to get married and be a wife. No restrictions besides, look, you want to get married, find a believer. Encourage them to get married. Encourage them to have a family, to be a wife as she previously was. Now, Paul's not saying that all women need to go out and get married. He's addressing younger widows who were previously married that they didn't have a restriction. He says, look, you enjoy being a wife, go back and do what you were doing beforehand. If you find a guy that's godly, marry them. Now, I'm not saying we need to create a Christian widow dating app. Not suggesting that. But probably our church and churches in general should have a much more conducive environment to celebrate when there's a widow who's gone through challenging circumstances and finds another person and they love and they get married. We should probably celebrate that because there's a benefit, Paul says. He says that there's one less temptation for Satan to use. Again, that would eliminate them from potentially making some sort of pledge to God and going back on it. It might always eliminate the temptation from Satan to focus on how bad their situation was. I've known some widows who never got past that tragic moment that they experienced. And it's 30, 40, 50 years later. And it's deep-rooted, and there's a challenge, and sometimes it leads to bitterness. And so there's some aspect where some women may want to get married again, and that actually they go, oh, there's hope in life. They see something else different. By the way, when you glance back up to verse 9, we saw that phrase, the wife of one man. It's very similar to the phrase, husband of one wife in chapter 3. When we were discussing elders and deacons, it goes back to having a wandering eye and faithfulness. It doesn't mean that a widow who got married again and then is widowed later in life, that you can't put her on the list. I'll give you an example. You might remember Elizabeth Elliot. Her husband Jim was a missionary who was killed doing missions and by cannibals. After he died, she married again. And the second husband died, she married again. And the third husband died. Now, first of all, you learn the lesson, don't get married to Elizabeth Elliot. That's number one. But let's just say that Elizabeth Elliot was part of our church at UHBC and had a similar story, and maybe she didn't have children. She would be a widow without income or a financial resource. And in that stage, she could still be put on the list, even though she'd been married 3 times because all of her 3 husbands died, and she was faithful to each one of them while she was married to them. So it's not a prohibition of just once being married or twice being married. The idea is, were you faithful? And now do they have can they be on the list? So the emphasis is faithfulness. A positive testimony, someone who could be an example to other women. Paul concludes this section with verse 16. If any woman who's a believer has dependent widows, she must assist them, and the church must not be burdened, so that it may assist those who are widows indeed. Now, I'm not exactly sure why Paul has this verse in here, or why he mentioned it. It may be because someone had misunderstood some of his earlier teachings. Maybe some were taking things to the extreme. Maybe some widows were financially capable, but they were still taking money from the church. Maybe some family members weren't doing what they were supposed to do. They weren't taking care of their mama. Or maybe some had read verse 8 and thought Paul was only saying, well, men have to take care of widows. Or that men were the only ones who were responsible to take care of their mama. And so Paul seems to say, hey, look, regardless if men are doing it or not, regardless if the church is doing it or not, you ladies, you've got to look out for each other. Use this to serve widows and be an example, a godly example to others around you. And yes, we have deacons who are assigned to reach out to our widows and those in assisted living, but that doesn't take the responsibility off of us. And I think Paul here has another general rule, and that is this. When we serve each other, the church is able to expand who and how they help each other. Again, Paul is saying, look, we have to treat each other as family. We deal with challenges in the family. We love each other as family. We look out for each other as family. And when we individually do that, then the church as a whole is free to expand in ways to help others. And there's a practical side to this. Let's say that, I don't know, a few times a year I go to our assisted living places, or I visit people from our church in a nursing home, and a few times a year, that's probably pretty good. But if I'm the only person doing it, I'm not saying I've experienced this, I have, is that I might not always be received that well. We have a thing called sarcasm. It's like, well, finally somebody came to see me, right? And if I show up and I'm the only person that's seen them every 6 months, and I get, well, finally someone came to see me, I might not be as encouraged to want to go back there and experience that again, right? Because it feels awkward and uncomfortable when you try to make a visit. But if we all have the responsibility to reach out to one another, how great is it when you show up and you go, just last week this person came and visited me. Look, I thought it was great. Went and visited somebody in the hospital that had knee surgery, and I walked up, I visited. It was the day after, got to pray a little bit. And on my way down, I see Karen Redding from our church, and she's got flowers, and she's going to take him up to this lady. And I thought to myself, that is awesome, right? Because there's an expectation probably for me to be there, but when somebody else shows up, I'm telling you, it means more than if the preacher shows up. Because if the preacher shows up and you're in the hospital, you think, I must be dying, right? But when a friend shows up with flowers, with encouragement, man, that's incredible. So yes, we all have a responsibility. And look, I think we do that really well in our Sunday school classes, but we're probably going to expand that opportunity. If you're on our prayer email list, it comes out on Wednesdays every week. At the bottom, there's a list of those who are in assisted living, those who are in other facilities. And so maybe one of the applications is simply start taking once a week, pick somebody, pray for them, write them a card, send them a text. And when we do that, then the church is then freed up to do even more things internally and externally for our community. I want to go back to our statement that we have for 2026, and we're still working on new ways to be able to help. It's to be known for what we love, not for what we hate. And we said this over and over again. I think in Christendom, what we found out is that everybody knows what we don't like because we're happy to share it. But they often don't know what we're for and what we love. So we've been thinking about what can we do as an entire church. We've had a couple things. In the foyer to the left, there's a table, and we have a little sheet of paper that has a bunch of resources in Stillwater for those who have a need. And so you can grab one of those. You can make your own survival bag. I would encourage you, no matter where you're at, keep one in your car or two in your car. And when you come across someone in need, you give them that. Specifically, it's for Stillwater, but you can have one that just doesn't have that in there. And they can find out where all the places are that they can get practical help here in the area. So we should be doing that. There's other areas like serving at Our Daily Bread or Habitat for Humanity, where there's opportunities for you individually to go and to serve. And do we have a day, I think it's the first Monday of the month, to go and serve? Yes, as a church. But it'd be better if we didn't have to do that, and instead our congregation, individuals, filled up that area where they was already serving so we could do something else. So we've come up with one idea. And our idea is that on August the 15th, we're going to have a free sale. It's not a sale, it's a free giveaway, basically, like a garage sale. So I would like to encourage you between now and August the 15th. If you have things, even things like a bed you need to get rid of, or lights or lamps, we're not thinking clothes, we're thinking about practical like dishes. We're going to have a garage sale out on a parking lot. We'd love to fill up 2 parking lots. Where we're going to let specifically international students or internationals in the area. You may not know this, but when an international family shows up and they're coming to school here at OSU, they often have a bag and nothing, right? They get an apartment and it's empty with nothing there. And so what we want to do is go, hey, it's free. So we've already been in contact with the international area at OSU. We're going to let them know, and we're going to volunteer to bring our trucks. First of all, we're going to load them up with our stuff that is great, that people will love. We're going to bring it here. People are going to come and go, can I have that? Yes. What's it cost? Nothing, right? Then we're going to put it in trucks, and we're going to take it to their place, and we're going to make sure that they have something in their apartment. And that's a great way for us to be known for what we love, not for what we hate. But one more thing that we just did this week. Appreciate Joel Templeton, who reached out to the international area. And a lot of times internationals also don't have vehicles. And so they have to transition from apartment to apartment maybe sometimes. And they can't get their stuff there because they don't have a vehicle. So we've got a little flyer made up, and we've already got our first phone call where someone on the 27th, 28th, 29th, and 30th of May needs help moving. And we should, as a congregation, go, yeah, we can do that. You bring a truck, it'll take you maybe an hour, I promise you. It's not like they're houses full of stuff. It's an apartment with a few things, moving it to an apartment where someone else. And again, something simple. It's hands-on so that we can be known for what we love, not for what we hate. And what a great missional opportunity. So I encourage you this summer, look, go through your house, find stuff that A, you don't need or you have extras of, and start setting it aside. We're going to get some new chairs in our fellowship hall, hopefully before the summer's out. And I'm already culling some of those older chairs that hook together that we're going to get rid of anyway. And believe it or not, you can put 3 or 4 of those chairs together. It makes a great couch. You can put 8 of them together, and that would actually make a pretty good bed if you had to. Because when you have something is better, I've heard, than nothing. So what a great way to be known for what we love, not for what we hate. If we can do that, if we can take care of true biblical widows, if we can find ways as a general rule to help those in our community and our family, I want to just suggest we might start being able to change the narrative in Christendom for being known for what we love and not for what we hate. It's been a joy to have our college students, those that are the last week here. Look, you've made an impact on our lives, and so let me just say thank you. If you're coming back, please come back here. Bring friends next semester. And for our church family who's staying, or college students, we're still going to do stuff, right? There's stuff to do this summer. We have Vacation Bible School. We have a whole lot of things to be involved in as a church, and I hope that you'll find a way to join with one another. Find someone that you don't know. Ask them out for lunch or dinner. Hang out with fellow believers. It's good to do that and to be part of our community. Let's pray. Gracious Father, Lord, you are great and gracious and wonderful. And Lord, I thank you that you have a provision in Scripture to take care of those where normally society might reject them. Lord, I thank you that you look after widows. I also thank you look after orphans, people who are vulnerable. And Lord, I pray that we as a church could find creative ways to be able to help out not only widows, but those in our community who have less. May we be known as that church who is the first to go, yep, we can do it. Yep, we're willing to fill that need. We can accomplish that task. And in doing so, we share the love of Christ, and maybe that impacts them in such a way that they consider you. And Lord, we give you all the praise and glory for any harvest that's there because it's all you anyway. But Lord, help us to be, as believers, willing servants, to get up and to do, to be convicted and to do. Lord, again, I thank you for our students who have been here for 4 years or 8, however long it takes them to graduate. We thank you that we are a sending church in that sense, that there will be individuals who've been discipled at UHBC that will go around the world, and so bless them. And Lord, may we always be a hub and understand that is our role, is to invest, to disciple, and then to release. And Lord, I thank you for just the foundation you have here at UHBC for 72 years of a community together that serves this area, that serves Stillwater, serves our larger surrounding area, made up of believers of all ages. Lord, I thank you that we're multi-generational. Lord, I pray that you would continue to keep that foundation here so that we can serve you and love you. I pray this most precious and holy name. Amen.